Welcome to Barnyard Language, honest talk about running farms and raising families. We are Katie and Arlene, an Iowa sheep farmer and an Ontario dairy farmer, with 6 kids, 2 husbands, and a whole lot of chaos between us.
While this is a podcast for farm families, sometimes our content isn't for the whole family. So kick off your boots, reheat your coffee, and join us for some Barnyard Language.
We are taking a brief holiday before starting Season 5 of the podcast. This episode was previously released, but we think you'll enjoy listening again or maybe hearing it for the first time. We will be back in September with all new episodes. We are so grateful for the amazing people who've joined us on the show in the past 4 years. The conversations have been educational, insightful, vulnerable, and heartwarming. We appreciate each and every one of them for agreeing to share their time and their voice with us and with you.
As always, we would appreciate it if you would follow, rate, and review the podcast so more people can find us. And even better, share your favorite episode with a friend. If you are a fan of the podcast, please become a patron through Patreon. You will be able to view our weekly updates on video, have early access to episodes, be entered automatically in any contests or giveaways that we run, and who knows what other fun benefits we might add for our patrons in the future. Listener support means we can continue to make the show. If you have a business or know of a business who would like to advertise on the show, please get in touch. While Barnyard Language continues to be a labor of love, we would love to have the funds to cover our costs and expand the community.
Are you a farmer or butcher ready to master direct-to-consumer marketing and meet success?
The team at ChopLocal is standing by ready to help. Sell your meat on the ChopLocal marketplace. Check out all the free meat marketing educational resources at ChopLocal University. Hire the team to help you out or tune into their new podcast called Meat Success.
And remember, there's more than one recipe for meat success. Let us help you fine-tune yours today at ChopLocalUniversity.com. So today we are excited to be talking to Kelsie Olds, who's joining us from Indiana today. And we always start our interviews with the same question. So Kelsie, this is a little harder for you because you're not a farmer, which we understand, but we're going to start with the same question anyway. So we always ask, what are you growing? So for our farmers, that usually includes crops and livestock, but can also include families and businesses and all kinds of other stuff. So Kelsie, what are you growing?
Definitely my children into some semblance of normalcy again. They're becoming slightly more Americanized after having spent 4 years in England. Also, I don't know the least weird way to answer this, but a healed leg, that's probably the least graphic that I can get in terms of there's some skin cells that are hopefully coming back eventually and things like that. I've just had surgery on my knee, so.
Right, it's not in tatters there under your table or something. But it was
right. No. It's not. I'm not in imminent danger. No, but yeah, that's what most of my energy is going towards, is either my kids or my online or my leg.
Yeah, and what age of kids are we talking about?
5 and 6.
So, yeah, a lot of growing still.
Yeah, exactly.
Mine are 6 and 7, so I'm right there with you.
Okay, yeah. My 6-year-old's about to be 7, which he tells us about 18 times a day. And that's only because he's at school for 7 hours. So, if he was, on weekends, it's up to 118.
I have to say, too, I saw your description of what happened to your knee on your Facebook. And I both felt such a moment of connection as a person who also does ridiculous shit, and such a horrifying squeamishness. I was never squeamish until I had kids, and now I'm...
Yeah, the moral of the story is that slides shouldn't have railings. That shouldn't be a feature of a slide. Because anything that gets stuck in that is gonna...
Oh, yikes, because you can get caught on it.
Yeah. Even your pants, even from a ripping your clothes standpoint, even if you don't rip parts of your body, then you don't want railings on a slide. That's the moral of the story. For building a slide, don't put railings on it. Make the walls smooth and tall, and you're good.
Yeah, I think playground people need to know that kind of stuff. Oh, and Kelsie, usually I warn our guests before we start recording, but I'm going to say it to you now since we've already started. Katie will always look like she's not looking at you because she's crocheting or knitting whenever we record, because her brain works best that way. But
that's fine.
yeah, we just like to tell people that so that you don't think that Katie's like reading a book or something.
No, I appreciate you saying it for everybody else, and I would have been like, oh, cool, something's going on.
It also removes pressure to make eye contact with people, and then that feeling that you're making too much eye contact and now you look like a sociopath, so then you look away and then you feel like you're not looking at anybody.
I will be fidgeting with either this Sasquatch from a McDonald's Happy Meal or this glitter bottle that I made. So
that is perfect. Everyone has to do what works for them. So you talked about your online space and that's something that you're growing. So since we haven't actually gotten there yet, can you tell us what are you doing online? What is your career, and what are you sharing with the world?
So I am the occupational therapist online. I am an occupational therapist in real life. I say the wrong ones on phone calls and things now because I've made them both a word into my head. And right now I'm not actually like doing a day job since moving back from England, where I was working as an OT, an occupational therapist on a U.S. Air Force base, working in the schools of like working with like military kids whose parents are service members. Now I am trying to do occupational therapist online advocacy full time for at least a little while, and so I am doing webinars and consultation. But most of what I do, I try to do stuff that's for free because I don't like gatekeeping healthcare from people. I don't like the U.S. system that does that, and that's why I started the occupational therapist page a while ago. And then it's shifted over the years to me trying to share like information about sensory processing and the way kids process sensory, the way everyone, adults, kids, everyone processes sensory input, and stuff about being able to empathize with your kids and understand their point of view, and stuff about when kids do stuff that doesn't make sense, but like there's actually a reason for it, and like what those reasons could be, and different ways that you can do things in your life or in your teaching or in your home that society might feel like those things are abnormal, but like they're a way that works better for you and your family, and stuff like that. I do a lot of advocacy in those circles and creating resources and having conversations. So
I feel like we can go in so many different directions in this conversation, and I don't know if we're going to have a 6-hour episode or what this is going to turn into, but I'm very excited. So I want to start first with the definition of occupational therapy. I think it's one of those fields that a lot of people don't really understand until you or one of your kids or someone you know gets referred into OT, and then you figure out what it is. But even then, it can be so specific as to why you got there in the first place. So could you broadly explain what occupational therapy is and who it's for?
Yes. Yeah, it's super confusing to people. I don't actually think I've ever said this on the occupational therapy anything before, but I used to have a blog a million years ago that didn't go anywhere, and it was called Not Career Counseling because it's because everybody thinks like a synonym for occupation is career and a synonym for therapy is counseling, so that's probably what occupational therapy is. It's not. I'll give you two definitions. I'll give you the definition I give grown-ups and the definition I give kids. So the definition I give grown-ups is that when you think of your occupation in modern English, that tends to, like I said, be what people think of meaning as your career. But if you go back to the roots of the word, to what occupies your time, anything that you do that occupies your time is an occupation. That means your like self-care tasks, the stuff you have to do, brush teeth, put on clothes, go to the toilet. That means your like life management things. So for some people, you know, making food for themselves or for their family might be a part of their day, or feeding a pet might be a part of their day, or knowing how to, you know, pay your bills might be a part of your day. And then, you know, your job, yes, your occupation, or your school, or wherever you go during the day, whatever you spend time doing, your play, your hobbies, the things that you enjoy, the leisure that you want to be a part of, groups and communities that you want to be a part of, your church, your poker night, your whatever it is, all of the things that you do that occupy your time are your occupations. And occupational therapy is focused uniquely on, like, other therapies or other medical interventions are going to be like the same no matter who you are. A surgeon, if you have the same injury, is going to do the same surgery if it looks the same inside of your, bones as they are for anybody. But then when you go for rehab after that, then your occupational therapist might be like, oh, okay, well, you need to be able to do your office job and play with your kids and all these things. And this guy needs to be able to, be a fisherman and talk to his grandkids. And so you just come from a different angle at it. That gets lost in pediatrics, actually, because pediatrics working with kids has this blurry line between the people who are paying you and the people who are making sure that your client shows up and the people who are actually your client. That doesn't exist in the rest of occupational therapy with adult populations. And so that's been a huge part of my becoming the occupational therapist and my own personal journey into doing therapy that felt meaningful to me. But I was going to say it ends up in, and that's not true because I'm not at the end of my journey. So somewhere in the middle, I've come to the way that I define it to kids. When a kid is like, why am I in your room? Like, what do I do here in OT in my therapy room at a school? Then I say, well, I have two jobs, really. One of my jobs is that everybody's brain and body have cool ideas, and sometimes people don't know what they are or how to figure them out. So I help them figure them out. And then my other job is that I go to meetings with schools and with parents and with a bunch of grown-ups, and I remind them that there are more than one way to have cool ideas with your brain and body, because a lot of times schools think there's only one right way to do everything. And usually that resonates with kids. I haven't, like, the kids I'm working with are usually like 10 or younger most often. So far that has been a sufficient explanation for why it is that we're in this room doing stuff. So
I think that's a really good place to start, because so often we bring kids to an appointment, like the eye doctor is easy. They're going to look at your eyeballs. The dentist is easy. They're going to check your teeth. But going to maybe a therapist or occupational therapist or counselor, those types of things, parents sometimes struggle with how to explain to their kids, what are we actually doing here? And it's not always easy for them to explain what that appointment is going to look like. And I was also wondering about, I think that some people aren't even sure necessarily what's going on with their kid or how they can help them, but they might be wondering what type of help is out there, and maybe OT is one of those resources that they could use. So can you talk about what some of those first assessments look like? Because some people are curious about what happens when you get in there, and also how to have those conversations with your child before you go into your first appointment. And I also know there are a lot of reasons that children, especially if we're talking about pediatric OT, end up in occupational therapy. So could you highlight some of the main reasons that you're working with kids and what things they're struggling with? Or maybe they aren't struggling all that much, but the people in their lives might be struggling with. Sometimes it's both, sometimes it's not. But so why are kids there, and what do those first appointments look like?
So I can only talk from a United States context, which is going to be a little bit different to, I don't actually know very much about Canadian context. I know a little bit about England from having lived there, but I was not working in English system. And then I know a little bit about Australia. But specifically in the United States, then there's two main realms where a kid might be accessing OT. One would be a kid who's above the age of 3. I guess if a kid is under the age of 3, then they could access early intervention anywhere in the States. Then there are early intervention services, which are a little bit more generalized and a little bit less standardized. So OT and PT and speech therapy might all be part of the team, and also other specialists, and they decide kind of what's best for a young child, because littler kids are kind of like less differentiated into the specialties yet. But then a kid above the age of 3, then one place where they might get OT services would be through school. That would only be if there was what's called educational impact of whatever their needs are. So a kid could have quite a lot of needs, but if those needs are not impacting their ability to get an education, then they are not the target audience for school occupational therapy. Sometimes that has really blurry lines, because it's like, well, their academics are great, but they have no friends and they're miserable and they're scared and they don't want to go and there's school anxiety and all these things. So there can be a lot of blurry lines in that, and that's where, districts will squabble about what the right thing is. But what it usually means for a kid to be educationally impacted in a way that requires occupational therapy is often either in the fine motor skills, which is like, well, in schools it's handwriting. I broaden the field a little bit more than that, but in schools everybody wants to talk about handwriting and wants to know about handwriting. It could be sensory processing related, which could be like the child is doing something unusual or doing something that seems very sensory seeking that's unusual. They're putting stuff in their mouth, they're bouncing off the walls, they're whatever, and we're trying to meet their sensory needs. Or they're like avoiding something, the noise is bothering them in such a way, they're hiding under the desk all the time, things like that. There's kind of a range of different sensory processing stuff. And then there could be some like life skills, fine motor skills, self-care skills, especially in classrooms for students with more significant disabilities that might be, their curriculum might involve working on life skills, how to cook something, how to open your containers at lunch, how to do laundry, how to brush teeth, and stuff like that are self-care tasks, sometimes get brought into higher support needs classrooms. And so an OT can be a part of that as well. And I guess if I was answering this from some lenses, I would say kids who have significant behavioral difficulties, which are often sensory or social or language or other thing or fine motor difficulties, but they are expressed in a behavioral way. And so an OT might end up being involved on that. And then outside of the school setting, people can also access OT in like a clinic. Like you go to OT during a non-school time, and that's like recommended by a pediatrician or something like that, because people can't just show up and decide that they want to have OT unless they're paying for it themselves. In the US system, you have to have it like recommended by a pediatrician. That's usually for a shorter duration than the schools ones are, because it'll be like, okay, for 2 months, we're going to try to work on this specific thing about your sensory processing or this specific thing about your fine motor skills and try to like solve it or get to a new way to do it or whatever is the right like outcome there.
So I know I asked you a big question and then I added another question to it. So I'm going to go back to and then what does kind of an initial assessment look like? I'm sure it depends a lot on the child, but kind of those first stages where you're trying to assess where the struggles are and how to help.
There might be questionnaires for the adults in the child's life involved, especially with sensory processing stuff, because whatever I happen to see doesn't necessarily, like I can go observe a kid in a classroom for 45 minutes, but if I see something, then great, I can write about that. But if I don't, that doesn't mean that there's no problem. It just means that for 45 minutes, everything was fine. So it might involve questionnaires to the parents, the teachers, other people who know the child well. It might involve like some kinds of standardized fine motor testing for fine motor stuff. So like there's different types of booklets and stuff, but they'll all generally be like, okay, here's some pencil and paper skills. Can you move these pegs from this side of the board to that side of the board? Can you pick up a bunch of pennies, like stuff that you do with your hands that have different types of fine motor skills. Usually kids feel like they're games, or at least like, boring games that adults invented that they're willing to humor them on. Like not, usually kids aren't like freaking out or like, if they are, then I'm not going to do that. But also it's not even usually a thing in my field. At least the only time that I usually have to go off script and can't do a standardized thing is if a kid is too young or their attention is too scattered or whatever to be able to do a standardized thing. It's much rarer for them to be like, I don't want to do this, I hate this, I'm freaking out, kind of a thing. And so then if I couldn't do standardized testing with a kid, which there are standardized ones even for young kids that don't involve any pencil skills but are literally just like, can you open this twist top bottle? Can you pick up a Cheerio with your fingers? Like other fine motor things that we do. If I can't do anything standardized because the child can't attend to it for long enough, then I might just play with them and observe things that they do and try to set up situations throughout the play so that I will get to see their fine motor skills. If I hand them a closed item, do they know how to open the item? Okay, cool. Something fun was in it. Now we're playing with that. If I hand them a tool, a spoon, do they know how to scoop up sand like you would if you were going to eat a thing? Okay, yeah, they do know how to scoop, like those kinds of skills. And then I'm just like observing what it is that they do. That's the main types of things. And then the kind of other realms would be stuff like assessing how someone fits into their wheelchair or with their aid of a different kind that they're using for mobility or for accessibility of some kind or things like that. I might observe them using those things and see how that works for them. Stuff like that is also within the realm of OT.
Mm-hmm.
So, Kelsie, I love one of the first things that drew me to your work was how much it's never the child that's the problem in your work. It seems like there's been such a focus on physical medicine that children are not just short adults physically. And to start seeing that in more developmental spaces, that children are not short adults who are just really shit at adulting. And also that a lot of people, and I will admit to sliding into this myself occasionally, that our kids are not doing things just to fuck with us. Usually. Sometimes they are. Sometimes they really are. But generally that's not their motivation. And I love how much of your work seems to focus on the adults are the problem or the adults' expectations are the problem. And maybe we're helping kids meet those expectations so the adults will chill the hell out. But it's not that the kid is doing it wrong. It's that the adult wants something stupid and let's just humor them because it'll be better for everybody. And maybe there's a good reason for it, but it's not, I think a lot of us grew up with a very because I said so attitude towards children. And it's nice to get rid of that when not treat children like they're not people. I think there's a lot of tendency towards treating children like they're just being difficult on purpose.
Yes, and I think that my book really tries to walk on a balance beam between two halves of things, one of which is everything you just described. I mean, I work in schools. I love schools. I want schools to be good. And I also acknowledge that there is this school industrial complex thing where it's everybody needs to walk in and sit down and be quiet and behave. And if you can't fit that mold, then you're a problem. That almost no individual classroom, I don't think, there are some, but if you walk into almost any kindergarten classroom in America, you probably most likely have a teacher who doesn't really think that way or doesn't say they think that way or doesn't want to think that way. They're not I took this job because I just fucking hate 5-year-olds and I want to make them miserable all the time. That's, nobody is like that. But the system is so set up that, and so, underpaid and overworked, that if you're, and everybody was trained this way, that if you're here's 30 children and they're all going to scream and lose their minds, and you were raised in a kids shut up and do what I say way, and you're stressed out and your needs are not met, and you're going to stay after school for 3 hours trying to work on stuff just to catch up so that you can spend your money to try to get school supplies for your kids to do stuff so that you can go home and get a tiny paycheck, then the adult is going to snap and be like, if you guys would just sit down and shut up, it would, we could all have an easier time. I don't even know what to do. And so there's this systemic feeding itself, burning everybody out who's good, and then they leave and then there's not anybody good thing going on in the world on one side. And then on the other side, there's also quite a lot of marketing and business made out of making adults feel terrible, horrible parent guilt for how much they're failing their kid at everything that they ever do. And how every single thing that the child ever does is a total reflection on the parents. And if your kid makes one noise in public, then you're a terrible parent. But if your kid watches an iPad in public, then you're a terrible parent. I also don't want to just reactionarily to the first thing fall into the second thing, because it's not the kid's the problem and it's also not the adult's the problem. It's everybody's a team and we're working on a team and everybody's needs are valid and everybody needs to have their needs met. And there's a way to do that. We just aren't being told about the way to do that because that's not something you can sell. Let's work together as a team and figure shit out is not great. There's not a product that can customize to everybody that you can sell them that and then make money from. And there's not a sensory bin that you can act okay, well, if you just have this thing, then your kid will be fine and, and you won't have a problem. And so So having a balance in the middle is hard, and there's limited resources for it, because a lot of like things that are trying to defend the kid will kind of demonize the parent, or be like, you should just have an endless well that you tap into and just martyr yourself for your kid, and you need to, if you don't have them in physical skin contact with you from the time that they're born until the time that they're 3 years old, then they're probably never going to attach, and they're going to be traumatized, and and like,
I thought they changed that to high school. Or is it only high school if it's not weird?
But then you get to a certain point and then it's weird. So like there's a, like then all of a sudden the switch turns and it's like, oh no, you're too attached now. You can't be too attached to your kids. Now you have to cut that off, and you went too far. Like that was too long.
Yes. And part of that is that, people say, and then they mean, 800,000 different sources on all sides, but like the societal message becomes this big tangled mess. And so I deal with adults who have come from super permissive backgrounds, and so they are by default super permissive, like the way that they were raised, and they're like freaking out because they don't know how to have one boundary. And then I deal with parents from super permissive backgrounds who are reactionarily trying to be super strict, and so now they don't know how to like chill a little. And then also adults from super strict backgrounds who are exactly like they were raised, don't have any questions about that, just being super strict. And then adults from super strict backgrounds who are trying to reactionarily do something different, and so they're being super permissive and they don't have one boundary. And so it's like there's all of these, there's a Punnett square of grown-ups, and everybody's just out here trying to do our best. And I feel like I can't say it enough. It doesn't sell to tell you that you're doing your best and that you're doing a great job and that your kid's probably going to be okay and that you can probably get it wrong like 50% of the time or 60% of the time. And, if you're willing to like apologize and prepare and, figure stuff out and act like you're not just a giant who knows everything, but that you're like a person figuring stuff out with your kids, that's okay. And then they like learn skills from that. And it's soapbox.
I feel like the other side, at least in the States, and I'm going to guess that most of the world is probably like this. If you can't sell it or legislate it, it just does not exist. And so there's no effective, considered standardly effective way to write a law that says, how about if we give schools the money they need and the resources they need, and then we'll all just pinky swear to do our best. And we won't make kids take ridiculous testing that doesn't teach anyone anything except how to take a test. And even for the kids who that is suitable for, it's still bullshit. It's still a waste of time. I say this as someone who tested very, very well. It's still bullshit. What if we just gave people resources and support and then didn't, we're 2 weeks into school and I'm already getting and sending text messages about how I've failed at my first grader's homework, and the teacher doesn't have the option to not assign homework because the state says they have to have homework. And, I don't want to be embattled against my kid's teacher either, because neither of us is getting paid enough to fight with the other. But what a waste of time. And if we could put our energy towards, I don't know, raising decent humans instead of fighting with a first grade teacher, I think we'd all be a lot better off. So one of the questions I added here is, what is it like to get so internet famous so quickly? Do people stop you for autographs now, or like?
No, I've been recognized twice, I think, and both times were very funny. One time I was just like booking it to KFC to pick up food for my family in England, because we had like 2 restaurants in our very small rural town, and one of them was KFC for who the heck knows what reason. Just what you think of when you think of England. And somebody just stopped me and started enthusing at me, and I really didn't even understand what they were talking about for way too many seconds or minutes of the conversation, because they kind of just like jumped into like, oh, I love you and I love what you do and blah blah blah, and I'm a little bit struggle with recognizing people's faces. So I assumed I already knew them. And I was just like, yeah, cool, thanks. And I assumed I knew them from like my day job. And I don't even remember when in the conversation it was like, oh, my online job. Okay, yeah, no, my bad. And then the other time was when I, on a like a free stuff swap group of Facebook, like in my neighborhood, get free stuff that I don't want, and I'll give away stuff, and then somebody else can use it. And I wanted sand for the sandbox at my work, and my day job. And so I went to pick up the sand, and the lady, and I was like, thank you so much. Like, the kids I work with are going to love this. And she was like, I know who you are. And I was like, oh, okay. Again, still thinking about my day job. And she's like, I told my husband, the occupational therapist wants our sand. And I was like, oh, okay. And every once in a while when I'm scheduling posts, I'll just think the occupational therapist wants our sand. And so that lady has had a profound impact on my brain forever. I have tried really hard because, so I basically, for like several months, then like 2 people paid any attention to what I was doing, and then I wrote about Bluey, and then all of a sudden 700 people paid attention to what I was doing, and then it never stopped growing. I early on made a couple of decisions that were smarter in retrospect than I even knew that they would be. One, to privacy sticker my kids' faces, because I had just been posting them up until then, because the 2 people who followed were people who I knew. And I retroactively went back and changed every post that I had ever had and stuck privacy stickers on my kids' faces. And I'm glad that I did that at that time, because it would have been harder to do the longer that I was doing the page. And another was that I really tried and still try to make decisions for the page based on what actually feels like it's authentically me, and not like based on what I think will do good at social media, which I feel like is such a trite sounding thing to say. Like, I chose to be authentic sounds like more inauthentic bullshit. But I genuinely mean it, that I literally, like, if I have to decide between something or whatever, I will still get this stuff tangled in there that's like, okay, well, if I do this, then this might work, and if I do this, then this might work. And I'll be like, what actually feels like the way that I talk, or like what actually feels like a thing that I do and would think is a reasonable person, because otherwise it will just like quicksand soak you in to be like I don't even look at numbers of things. I don't really try to pay attention. I did pay attention to when I got 100,000 followers because my coworker bought me ice cream. We had a little ice cream party in my office. It was really sweet and kind. But other than that, I try not to pay attention to just anything, because it'll drive you crazy being like, why did 1 million people see this and then 4 people saw that? And, you know, and they're both of the same exact type of post with a photo. And like, there's so much luck involved that you just can't.
And I feel like as soon as you understand the system, then it changes, right? The people who are out there messing with the algorithm are changing it up as soon as we kind of figure out what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah, I got my page flagged as spam for sharing a link to my own book where I'm selling it. So now I don't do that. So the only things that I do is I don't do stuff if it seems like it's like actively causing a problem. I'm not going to be like, no, I'm being authentic. I'm going to keep sharing this and get my page banned.
I swear it's my book, but I guess I can't share it to you.
Right. I wrote this. How else am I supposed to tell people about it?
The one thing that you might actually give me a little bit of money for, and I can't even promote it on my own page.
Yeah, I have a suspicion that they don't want you to be paid in any way that isn't by Facebook. So they're like, no, you can't share that.
See, Arlene, is this a question that I messaged Arlene at like 3:00 in the morning the other day with like 8 words of a question so that I would remember it. And now I don't know if it was this one or not.
I was hoping you understood what you were trying to say.
Well, I do understand it, especially seeing the surge of people coming to a midlife understanding about how their own brains work, for better or worse. How do we know if our kids actually need supports, or if they're just weird and we should leave them alone? I mean, because some kids are just weird and that's fine. I mean, I can support them in being weird without sending them to OT.
So that's a really good question, both because my kids are weird as heck. So I'm constantly asking myself this as a parent, and not even in a like professional setting or anything. And I was pretty weird. And I think kids are weird.
Yeah, kids generally are pretty weird.
Here's the thing I absolutely love this category of like internet joke when somebody digs up something that people were complaining about kids like 300 years ago or whatever, and it sounds exactly like children right now. I just saw one the other day from 1924 compared to 2024, and it was a newspaper article because, like, you know, kids are saying skibbity or whatever all the time right now. And the newspaper article was mad about kids getting access to their own radios and that there was like radio slang that they were all saying to each other. So they were like saying like, I'm totally broadcasting right now, and like, oh, don't listen to him, he's just static. And the teachers were complaining about it because they were like, all the kids will talk about these days is their radios. And I was like, I love it with all my heart. Children have been children forever. But I tell myself all the time with my son, who is autistic, he's diagnosed autistic, and he's in first grade, so he hasn't been in school for very long, but he does decently at school. So he started school in England. He went to reception and then year one, and then now he's in first grade in America. Because they start formalized school as basically preschool age, a year kind of, it's like their cutoff date is different, so there's not a one-to-one comparison. But basically he did preschool and kinder in England, but with the expectations of kinder and first, and then now he's here for first. And so I was worried about it constantly. We did get the equivalent of an IEP, like an education plan going in. But when it was going in, it was like stuff like he will be able to tell you what he wants for lunch because he did not speak for 8 months of school to anyone. And like there was like so much communication between me and his teachers to try to be, you know, like helping. And they were lovely. Everybody was lovely. Everybody who we've encountered. We've been so lucky. And then in year one, he was like doing great. He was really flourishing. In my very, very limited experience, England is really good. The places we were at were good at rural small schools. We're good at doing accommodative things and bad at putting them on paper. And in my admittedly limited experience, American schools are really great at putting it on paper and bad at actually doing it. And so they would be like, oh yeah, we don't need to update his plan again until next year. And then his teacher would be changing things and doing things that were like legitimately helpful things with him all the time. And so I kept being worried about problems and being ready to fight battles, and they weren't actually problems and no one was having a problem. His teacher wasn't having a problem. He wasn't having a problem. He wasn't distressed. He wasn't anything. And I was just ready to fight because I'm mad about it developmentally being inappropriate or whatever. Like, stop trying to teach my 4-year-old how to handwrite. He doesn't need to. Cut it out. Go away. And he's like, woo, writing. So, like, I don't need to go fight people about that, you know. It had not entered my mind that he might just enter school and be okay. Because I did this every day online and for everybody who's not okay. And it's just luck. It's just luck and what your brain is like. So I've been telling myself this thing where I'm like, I don't need to fight a battle that doesn't exist yet. I don't need to make something into a problem that's not currently a problem. So there's a bunch of stuff right now in school that he's not getting because he's transitioning from an English system to an American system. And some stuff is confusing, and some ways that they do different thoughts is confusing. But his teacher is lovely, and his teacher loves him. And I think it's beyond nonsensical and absurd to the highest degree that they're doing numerical and letter grading of his papers. So he's got like a 52 and a 60 and things on things, and he doesn't seem bothered or know what it means, and I am not bothered, or I do know what it means. I'm not bothered. I don't care at all. And his teacher doesn't seem bothered that he doesn't get it yet, and they're just working on it. And so I'm trying to be like, I don't need to go jump down anybody's throat and be like, why are you writing a 52 on my kid's paper? He doesn't even know what you want from him. This is dumb. I'm trying to change my language. This is undevelopmentally informed, and nobody in first grade needs to know how to correct grammatical sentences. But I don't need to fight a battle that doesn't exist yet, and nobody's bothered and nobody's distressed. And so to take it from my own very meandering life opinions back to the question that you actually asked, I think especially as you get into older kids, there is a little bit of subtlety and nuance that you got to be careful with, because I was a pretty weird kid, and I was super weird by the time I was like 10 to 12, but I also knew how to hide it completely by then. And so, like, if your kid is like suddenly internalizing a bunch of stuff and you like are suspecting that there's a problem, then there could be something going on for them that they haven't talked to somebody about. But on the flip side, I think if you're cultivating from birth the fact that you can come to your parents with stuff and that you're accepted as you are, and you know that you aren't going to be pulled off for being weird, and nobody's going to, you know, like my daughter is just the weirdest person you've ever met in your life, and great deal of the time I want to instinctively tell her, like, can you stop making that noise? It is very annoying and I am right next to you. Or like, can you just not do that? Or just, and I'm very careful with my language, and I also don't do that. Like 98% of the times that I want to do that, I pull out earplugs from my pocket and put them in my ears instead of tell her to stop making the noise, or I move further away from her, or I whatever. And so I think that if you're having a family culture like that, then you'll notice if there's something that suddenly starts going on for your kid where they might be like internalizing some distress from school or whatever. And then otherwise, if you don't have a problem, you don't have to make it into a problem that doesn't exist. I tell myself that anyway.
I think one thing that's helped with my kids, because mine are 6 and 7, so they're the same age as yours, is that, you know, with both Meet the Teachers this year, I said, you know, if my kid needs something, tell me. If you don't tell me that my kid needs something, I'm just going to trust that you know what you're doing and that my kid is fine. Because I will admit that I pushed really hard for speech therapy for our daughter. I'm very glad I did. It got her early intervention services. It got her to the point that now when I mentioned to her new teacher that she had been in speech therapy because she wasn't speaking by the time she was 3, they kind of stared at me and acted like perhaps I had some other daughter that was not this daughter who now talks in her sleep. You know, and so just kind of saying, if there are services or anything that will help my kids, tell me about it. My family is very lucky. We have the resources. We have good insurance. You know, I will never be offended if you say, hey, your kid could use help on X, Y, and Z. But if you don't come to me and say, hey, your kid could use help, or if I ask and you're like, nah, they're fine, I'm just going to let them crack on being weird. I mean, they're weird. That's them being weird is not a problem. How everyone reacts to how weird they are might be an issue, you know.
Right. My kid had one of those things where it's like, these are some things that you should know about me, and these are, you know, like that you give the teacher before the year starts. And I made a draft of the way that I would fill it out. I did not actually end up filling it out about my daughter. And I was like, I am really good at pretending to be a cat. My favorite thing to do is pretend to be a cat. My favorite part of school is pretending to be a cat at recess. Something you should know about me is I like cats. I love to learn about cats. Sometimes I need a little help with being a person.
That seems valid to me. I don't know. I mean,
yep, that was, and I did not actually turn that one in. I gave them a more helpful iteration of that, but that would be the definition, the difference between the definition of my kid's just being weird and look, my kid's gonna come to school with socks on her hands and feet and be crawling on all fours and be meowing at you.
Yeah, that's right. And if you open her lunchbox, there might be some little bowls in there that she's going to laugh at.
Oh, we haven't gotten there yet. Thank goodness. Oh my gosh. It's probably coming for us.
Yeah.
We've been doing this for 3 years. So
Arlene, I don't know if I mentioned that my daughter packed her own lunch for the first time the other day, packed it in cereal bowls in her lunchbox. And then
innovative.
Thankfully, Daddy saw that she was trying to take a frozen margarita pack as her ice pack.
Even more innovative.
That might get sent back home.
Teachers will be like, I'm confiscating this. This is for me.
I think we also need to remember, though, on that same topic, though, if there are things that aren't an issue at school but are impacting your family life, it's also okay to advocate for yourself in those spaces, right? You know, because some of our kids can really hold it together pretty well for the school day. But if home life is hell, then you have to be able to advocate, and whether that's with the school or with your family doctor, or to have some documentation and some backup to be able to say, yeah, they're doing it fine educationally, but we can't continue to function like this. So yeah, there needs to be supports in other places.
any kind of distress or dysfunction is a, you know, a valid sphere to be looking at and asking, like, is there a different way that we could be doing this? It's not just in one area.
Podcasts are free to listen to, but they aren't free to create. Katie and I would appreciate your support as we work to build the Barnyard language community.
Patreon is an easy way for you to make a contribution that goes directly to making the show. As a member of our Patreon community, you get to watch the video version of our weekly updates, complete with questionable hairstyles and clutter. With 3 levels of support, you can choose a tier that works for you.
Keep the podcast going by becoming a patron today at patreon.com/barnyardlanguage. So I've been thinking about this as someone whose child has done OT in the past at different stages. And I was wondering about, and I don't know that there's an easy way to do this, but as a professional, what are some ways that both the family and the child can keep up with some of the suggested exercises or practice or things that we're supposed to do? And also the part that you talked about, making sure that the school isn't just writing down the recommendations and not following through, but making sure that we advocate to make sure that the things that these amazing professionals have suggested are actually going to happen.
You're headed full speed for a soapbox that isn't even the one that you think that you're headed for, or the one that you anticipated with the question. So here's the thing. When I was a new grad, then I was working PRN, which is like super casual part-time, everywhere that would have me. So I worked in skilled nursing facilities. I worked in hand clinics, because that's a common OT is doing hand therapy. It's like rehab after carpal tunnel surgery or rehab after you broke your finger or whatever. And also schools and all of that. And in a skilled nursing facility, which is often a place where somebody who's older, who's either had like an accident or a surgery or something, is going to go for a longer amount of time than you can stay in a hospital, but not forever. It's not like a nursing home forever. It's like to rehab from a stroke for several months, or to rehab from a hip surgery for several weeks, or things like that before you can go back home. And so working in a skilled nursing facility or working in a hand clinic, then the adult is the one who shows up for therapy. The adult is the one whose insurance is paying for therapy. The adult is the one who is voluntarily coming to therapy. And if I tell the adult, if you do these exercises after therapy, then your hand will get better faster, or your hip will rehab faster, then they are usually happy to go with that. And if I am doing a good job at being an OT, then it is also tied with things that they have to do anyway, like, hey, while you are putting your clothes on for the day, make sure that you use these body mechanics, because you don't want to start this movement pattern that's not what you want for rehab. What you want is for your leg to move this way as it goes into the pants, or whatever it is. And once you've got them on, maybe you can practice that motion 3 more times, and then you'll know that you've got it, or, you know, like that kind of thing. Because I'm tying it to what they already do throughout the day and what is already meaningful throughout the day. If an adult shows up to a child's class and pulls them from the class and takes them to a room where they have them for 30 minutes to practice writing the letter S because they currently write it incorrectly, they write it starting at the middle and they draw a curve around to the bottom and they draw a curve around to the top. And the adult is like, no, you're supposed to write a letter S all in one stroke. It goes like this. You're supposed to cross the midline. I don't know why you're not crossing the midline, but what I'm going to have you do is practice writing it 50 times. And then when you go back to class, then you need to make sure that you write it correctly, but you won't because I'm not there to cue you. And then when you go home, you need to practice writing S 100 more times, but you won't because that's extremely boring. Excellent. I've done my job. Return to your class. Even if the adult had a magic wand that they could wave that would make the child want to comply 100% with what they said for every minute of the therapy session, that would not be a successful model, but it's the one that you're basically taught in school. And it's the one that everybody is just out here acting like is some imaginary world where kids just do literally everything that you tell them to, and they don't have to care about it, and they don't have any volition, and they don't have any autonomy. And you're not even addressing the root of the thing. You're addressing a symptom of the thing. You're acting like the letter S is something that you come out the womb knowing how to do, and that if you're not doing it right, then it's probably your choice for not remembering that I cued you to do it right the last 50 times we did it. When in actuality, that is a symptom of the fact that if you cannot cross midline when you're drawing a letter, then there's some core strength like muscles in your core that are probably weakened. There's movement, because humans develop from the inside out. Core first, then shoulders, then elbows, then wrists, then hands, then fingers, and same with the lower leg. Core first, then hips, then knees, then ankles, then feet and toes. With our movements, with our finesse, with our everything, when you look at a baby, they aren't really wiggling their fingers. They're like flopping their whole entire arm at the shoulder in front of their face, and they're like, whoa, look how cool. Look what I just learned how to do. I learned how to fling my entire arm across the room. And then, you get to like maybe like 9 to 12-ish months, and they might be able to sit in a high chair and kind of like scoop a Cheerio into their hand with their whole entire hand, grabbing the, like, smashing it with their whole, palm and fingers as if those were one unit. And then you get up to like kindergarten, and now they can move their fingers and stuff. Now they can move a pencil around and do more of these like finessed movements, and they're really large and sloppy because they're 5. And then by the time that you're 10, then you can write sentences and paragraphs. And then by the time you're an adult, you can write in small handwriting that's within lines and that's neat if you try, and like all those kinds of things. But if you're missing pieces of the foundation that are lower down than the level that you're at, then you can't just keep harping on at the level that you're at. You can put more and more and more shingles on the roof, but if it doesn't have any walls or a basement or a foundation, then you've got a really great roof that's gonna fall over, and that's not a house you can live in. And so, like, if I notice that a kid is missing stuff in their core, stuff at their shoulders, stuff at their elbows, stuff at their wrists, then it doesn't matter how much I keep trying to drill them on their fingers. They're not going to pick up on what I'm saying. They're not going to pick it up in an efficient way. And if I go back to the roots and do the foundation from the ground up, then I don't ever have to tell them, do this with your fingers. Because if I'm already trying to teach them a most efficient thing, then all I really have to do is be like, look, you can do it like this. And then if it's more efficient, they'll be like, oh, thank God, I can do it like that. I don't have to keep doing it the way that I've been doing it. I guess if I wanted to, if I knew all of this and I wanted to be like, great, let's strengthen your core by having you do sit-ups and then go home and do some planks. And then, like, I mean, I could do that. I'd probably be a physical therapist if I did that. But instead, if I'm like, have you ever heard of a game called The Floor is Lava, where we throw stuff all over the ground, and we're gonna throw some heavy mats, so you're doing some lifting and strengthening, and then like pushing with your whole body and your shoulders and your core as you throw this out away from you. And there's the next step. Now you have to jump over to that, and you can't land in the lava. And now you're jumping and balancing, and you're working on your core and you're strengthening. And we do this for 30 minutes, and we play and we make stuff up, and we tap into what's actually occupationally meaningful to the child. And then I do not have to tell them your homework is to go home and play The Floor is Lava, because they will go and they will tell their friends at recess, and then they will go and they will start it up in the line when they're supposed to be standing still, but instead they're thinking about this cool new thing that they just learned about. And then they'll go home and they'll teach it to their brother and their mom, and then they'll come back and they'll have practiced for 12 more hours than if I had told them, this is your assigned homework, you need to go home and do this. And I'm saying this with a game that everybody's heard of and knows and loves, which is actually a shorthand for the adults when I explain this, because with the kids, I am not actually usually teaching them a game that everybody knows and loves. I'm like, oh, cool, you're really into pirates lately. I'm a bad guy pirate, and I'm stealing your treasure and running away, and we're gonna just make shit up from there. And there is no structured beginning and middle and end to this game. But I'm going to teach you 50, 100 different ways that you could play, because I'm going to be thinking of ideas and flinging them out. I've got markers and paper and whiteboard and markers and pencils and crayons and big butcher paper rolled out on the floor and an easel and stuff. Every single corner of my room, everywhere you go, I'm not more than 2 steps away from something that can write on something else. So if you start to say something cool, I'm going to be like, oh, I want to write this down so that I remember it, and I'm going to model for you that your words are important and deserve to be written down so that somebody can remember them. And then I'm going to write them down, and then I'm going to find a time to put that exact thing back into our play and model reading it as if I can't remember what it is that I just said, but I need to read it, so that you've got that, like, oh, my words were important and I wrote them down, and then you remembered them and then you read them back, and that's how you got them back to me. Or oh my gosh, you just did the coolest rocket ship mission. Excellent. Well, you need a certificate from the president congratulating you on your rocket ship mission. I'm going to be writing that out right now. Here it is. It says, good job on your rocket ship, signed the president. And I'm going to give that to you, and you're going to take it home in your backpack, and then your mom's going to be like, why do you have a paper that says, good job on your rocket ship, signed the president, and you're going to be like, oh, listen to this game that I did where I did this stuff with the rocket ship, and I'm going to do it right now, and then you have to sign me a certificate, and it says the president. And so there's that's the native language of children. Play is the native language of children. If you leave a child alone for 15 seconds, they will start playing with something. If they're supposed to be standing in a line, they'll start kicking something around or picking at something or whatever. And if I can incorporate the goals of our things into their native language, like, that's my job. If I'm not doing that, then I'm not doing my job. And I don't blame people for not knowing how to do that because they're not taught it in school. So if there's an OT listening to this who's like, no, I get it. I'm not like, you suck and you're a terrible person. But if I had somebody come to me who only spoke Spanish and I just kept giving them exercises in English and never showing them and never trying to find a translator and never trying to learn anything and never anything, I just kept giving them stuff in English and knowing that they couldn't access it, I wouldn't be doing my job. And if I am working with a kid and I just keep handing them adult-oriented exercises that I expect them to do as if they're an adult who drove themselves to therapy, who decided to be here, whose goals are their own, which is not true because 7 adults sat in a room and said, this kid is bad at X, Y, and Z, so let's make goals about it. So if I am just only treating them in adult language, then I'm not doing my job. I'm not reaching them. And if I'm like, well, though I obviously can't do enough in 30 minutes because I'm not even given enough time by the school district. That's true. If my answer to that is I will send home homework with them. No, that's not true. That's not doing my job. If I tie it into the language of play, I won't even have to tell them to do it. They'll just do it.
That is a fantastic soapbox. You're right. It wasn't what I expected, but I love it.
It wasn't. Everybody, and again, like that's where people will be like, like, so if parents were asking me what, I do have parents ask me sometimes, very involved parents will ask me sometimes, what should I be doing with my kid at home? And I'll start naming like play things, like, well, climbing on stuff, hanging from stuff, like going upside down, like crashing into stuff. And they're like, oh, I mean, like, is there like a worksheet? And I'm like, no, go play outside.
Tear up the worksheets.
I feel better about myself that asking what we're supposed to do is considered highly involved. And I think it is such a mental shift, too, to realize that it's not the way they write the letter S is the problem. Because it's not like them being able to write the letter S is what's going to get them into Harvard or not. It's not like getting into Harvard is what will make them a good person. Being able to cross the midline is really important. Having core strength is really important. How you write a letter S, really not important.
Yes, and that's the other thing too, is that it almost gets turned into as if it's like a moral issue or whatever, or a behavioral issue. When in actuality, if you went, even if it did make sense to be drilling the letter S, the reason would be because it's not efficient and it's going to be harder for them, and it's going to be maybe, their hand will get tired, or they'll be fatigued, or they'll be sore, or they won't be able to keep up, or whatever. These are all just things about describing how the kid like lives their own life. None of them are like, you're a bad person who's doing bad things or whatever, but they get like so obscured and escalated to the point where they are a behavioral issue because it's like a pencil is a threat. Adults want me to do things I can't do. Some kids with some types of brains will internalize all of that and just like be exhausted and miserable and sad and anxious and feel like a horrible person, but they'll keep trying as hard as they possibly can and, still have sloppy handwriting and then still get acted like it's a moral issue and that they just don't care enough and blah, blah, blah. And then some kids on the flip side will just like drill down into like protecting themselves and like, no, this is a threat and I hate you and I hate school and I'm not even going to touch a pencil and I'm not even going to come in your room and you can't put a worksheet in front of me because I'll rip it up and ball it up and throw it away. Like that's like the two like branches that it'll usually take. the kids with obliging brains versus the kids with brains that are going to protect themselves. And it's not like I'm not using those as code for like one is like autistic and one is ADHD, or like kids of all neurotypes will, for whatever reason, be into one of those, you know, types of categories, whether they internalize stuff or whether they externalize it, really. But then it's like, even if this was the right thing to do, even if drilling the letter S was the right thing to do, even if all of this, it would still be whack to be doing it from the perspective of like, or you're a bad person and your behavior is bad, because all of it was always only ever supposed to be like, I promise you will actually need to write words in your life. I want to make your life easier. But it's like we lose sight of that in the weeds of like, why won't you just do what I say? Blah, 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 blah.
So what would you say to parents if your job didn't depend on them? Like if you could just have like what's that movie, The Purge, where they start killing everybody and nobody gets in trouble? But like emotionally, like if you could just really say your piece to someone. I was trying to come up with I got nothing.
I really have a lot of empathy for parents. I mean, there are some kinds of ones where I'm really frustrated. But if I could say anything to anybody, it would probably be like whoever's in charge of like school administration or like something like that. But I mean, I guess I would probably say like, just, it's like, you can chill like slightly. Like you, like, filling your kids' time with structured things doesn't make them mentally healthier, actually. Please give them time, like, to like breathe and play and be kid stupid and, you know, like say silly words with their friends and do things that don't make any sense, and like that there's like so much learning and exploration and growing that's happening from downtime and playtime. And also, I mean, if I could just beam something into everybody's head, I would want them to like have knowledge of their own bodies and how their own bodies and brains work, because I feel like you can't start changing the way that you talk to your kids or the expectations that you have from your kids if those things are already buried so deep in your own psyche about your own self that you feel like they're just how humans are supposed to be. And you don't even know that, like, you know, you have a sensory processing style, or like you you know, do things that, like that interacting with the world in a way to make yourself more comfortable is normal and human. And then kids just do it in inconvenient ways because they don't know ways to do it that are considerate of everybody else yet, because they just don't know. Like, that's a knowledge thing. You can just show them other ones. You don't have to like be mad at them or feel like they're doing something unreasonable. So my kids do a lot of screaming things at me that you don't want an adult to scream at you. Like, I hate you, you're fired, you're stinky, I don't even want you in my family, when they're like dysregulated and frustrated about things. And if I'm dysregulated and frustrated about things, I can walk out of the room and go into a different room and not talk to anybody anymore, because I don't want to hear the kinds of things that would come out of my mouth if I were pressed to continue conversing when I'm feeling that kind of a way. And I don't need to take my kids' power-grabbing little goofy sentences that they know how to say because they're 6 as if they are something that they'll say when they're 35, and worry about them abusing their future partner or whatever, because if I don't like snap back at them and be like, stop it, you can't talk to me that way, blah, blah, blah. What they need is the skill to know you can walk out of a room. You don't have to actually respond to somebody when they say something to you that bothers you. This is the difference between my children, who are polar opposites in every conceivable possible way. My son came up crying to me. This all happened within like the last like month. My son came up crying to me and was like, my sister said I'm a stink bug and I don't like it, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, are you a stink bug? And he was like, that's what she said. And I was like, okay, but in real life, for real life, are you a stink bug? And he was like, no. And I was like, well, then she's wrong. And he's like, yeah, she's wrong. And I was like, yeah, people are sometimes wrong. And he's like, oh. Yeah, she's wrong. And I'm like, yeah, she is wrong. People are just sometimes wrong. And then like literally like the next day, my daughter was nowhere nearby for this conversation, by the way. Like literally the next day, then my daughter comes running up to me and is like, my brother said I'm a nasty girl. And I was like, oh, are you a nasty girl for real in real life? And she was like, no. And I was like, oh, okay. And she's like, wait, yes. And I was like, what? And she was like, yeah, I am a nasty girl, and went running back off to her brother. I'm like, well, okay, that was not how I thought that conversation was going to go, but okay. I guess sometimes people can be right. But like, I do so much coaching of my kids of being like, if you don't like the sound someone is making, you can leave the room. If you don't like the sound someone is making, you can put on headphones. If you don't like the sound someone is making, you can ask them nicely to stop. You don't have to just run over and like beat them into the ground. Like you can, there are lots of options that aren't nuclear. And you know, that times a million, like times for everything. If you don't like the way someone is playing with you, you can stop playing with them. If you don't like the way someone's playing with you, you can ask them to play a different way. If you don't like the way someone is playing with you, you can go play with a different person. If you don't like the way someone is playing with you, you can go inside. Like there's a million of these, and I just like say the same script over and over with plugged in whatever it is, and it's like, as long as I can, and I'm not saying that I never get frustrated. I get frustrated all the time. My patience is way thinner than anybody thinks it is from the internet, because I'm a good writer. And if I just wrote constantly, by the way, I had a terrible time today, then people would be like, oh my gosh, this page is sad and boring. We don't want to read it anymore. And so I can't ever get anybody to believe me hard enough that I am exactly as impatient as you are, I promise. But like, if I can keep sometimes in my mind, or if the logical voice in my mind next to the impatient and frustrated voice in my mind can remind me that my kids are learning to self-advocate, and I don't help them learn to self-advocate by first squashing all their attempts at self-advocacy, but rather by channeling it into the one that would be like societally okay or whatever. Like, they're gonna be okay. The kids are gonna be okay. It's okay if they act like they're 5 when they're 5. I probably shouldn't act like I'm 5 when I'm not, but it's okay. Like, their actions are not the reflection of me as the parent. My actions are the reflection of me as the parent. Their actions are they're learning how to be a human being.
Yeah. So we've talked a lot about the fact that you're very child focused, and we've talked about your book, but we haven't actually even said the title of it. So I feel like we should at least get that in here.
Oh, this is a video. It's called Your Child's Point of View. I'll just do this anyway.
That's right. Hold her up. Yeah. Okay. Katie's got hers there too. So, your child's point of views, understanding the reasons kids do unreasonable things. I love the title because, I mean, like you said, sometimes what they're doing feels unreasonable to us, but isn't actually unreasonable. So, can you describe how your book is set up, and who it's for, and how it can be helpful?
Yeah, so the first line of the book is, this is a book for everyone. So that's the answer to who it's for. This is a book for everyone. This is a book for parents. This is a book for teachers. This is a book for anyone who works in child related settings. This is also, I feel like, and I have feedback from people agreeing with me, a book for people who don't have a kid or work with a kid, but just want to like learn more about their own self, their own inner child. That's not its primary focus. So I would understand if somebody was like, this isn't right for me, but I have a really lovely little group of writing friends, none of whom have children, all of whom bought the book, and all of whom who have been like, oh, this is actually, I'm learning stuff about, which has been so sweet. It is divided into sections. It is divided into, the first section is called Babies and Toddlers. Then the next section is called Littles and Middles. Then the next one is Tweens and Teens. Then At School, which covers all ages. And then Inner Child, which covers yourself. And on each of the sections, then there are like 10 to 15 scenarios, and each scenario covers a 2-page spread, because it's a big book and it's made to be able to like lay out, and you'd be able to see both of the side pages at the same time. And on the left side page, then there are word bubbles, and the word bubble at the top says the adult's point of view, and the adult is saying whatever words are related to like whatever issue it is that they're having. Like, my child, I'll just do it to do the example of what I was just saying. My child keeps making an annoying noise, all the time. That's not an actual page of the book, but that would be like what I was just saying about my daughter. And then underneath that is a word bubble reframing whatever it is from the kid's point of view. And they're in child language. So it might be, if my daughter was saying something, she might just be like, woo, ooh, I like the way that this song sounds that I'm making up, or, you know, like something like that. She's literally not even thinking about me at all whatsoever. I'm the only one thinking about me, and she's thinking about, you know, what she's doing. Then on the right side facing page, whatever the issue is that was discussed in the adult bubble and the child bubble on the left, then on the right facing page, then there's things to know, which gives developmental information that you might or might not know about that developmental age, because people don't necessarily know what age to expect children to develop different skills. I tried very much to give it in a progression of stuff model as opposed to an age of stuff model, because a lot of my audience have kids who are not going to do things at the age that is what the CDC website says is standard or whatever, but that doesn't mean that the parents can't know something about development. Like, kids usually develop this social skill, and then they usually develop this social skill, or whatever it is. And then, so it's things to know, which has that developmental information, and then things to try, which has problem-solving tips that may or may not actually work, but they can at least give you, there's so many of them that they can give you maybe a framework that you can jump off from. So my hope with the book is both to be a concrete problem solution for several common problems that adults and kids face or encounter, because you literally could be like, oh, my kid is spitting all the time, and I don't know why, and it's annoying, and it's gross. And open to the page about spitting and read about spitting and read problem solutions and try them, and maybe they would work. Or you could also read the book and be like, okay, well, my kid's doing this other thing that isn't in this book, but I have got the thought in my mind of how to reframe this from their point of view. Maybe I could think about some things that are factors that are unique to our family that the author might or might not have known about. And, maybe I could try to research a developmental thing about that, or maybe I could just try some problem solutions based on the type of problem solutions that are throughout the book. Same for if you are like, oh, yes, we do have this problem, but your problem solutions didn't work. What else is there? It tries to give theory and practical both, and in a real accessible way, because some people have been telling me that they read it one page at a time. Like, literally, they open it and read one scenario, and then they close it for the day, and I'm like, okay, cool. At the back, there's resources, and there's also an appendix, and the appendix explains some stuff about sensory processing and stuff like that, so that if you're trying to come up with your own problem solutions, you're not just fully on your own if I didn't address the exact thing that you're encountering. And then the last thing that I feel like is really cool about it is the inner child section. I feel like really pulls it all together, because like I was saying about this kind of battle between, kids need to just suck it up and stop it, while adults need to just suck it up and martyr themselves and give everything to their kids. Kids are the problem, adults are the problem, this whole kind of societal thing that goes back and forth. I feel like it would be hard for me to write a book saying, no, there really is a middle ground, and really, everybody needs to be able to get their needs met, without addressing the fact that there are these things in adults' life and heart and inner self that never got seen before. And some of them are ones that are literally true of me. I'm just writing my heart on the page. And then some of them are ones that I don't necessarily experience that exact feeling, but I know, people who do, and I can understand it. I can relate to it. I know one of them is the inner child basically saying, the adult being can you just stop? If you just knock it off, everything will be easier for everyone if you just stop being the problem. And the inner child being I spent my whole childhood waiting for relief from the situation that I was in, and now I'm an adult and I realize I'm supposed to do everything differently, and I feel robbed of the relief that I felt like I was supposed to get. And I feel like that I tried to be that level of viscerally honest with each of them, with really, really why this is so hard for me when I'm so dysregulated or so stressed out, what really my inner self could be saying about this, and not just in some kind of it's almost like a trope to be oh, everything's about your own childhood, or whatever type of thing, but really how is the child who I was affecting my relationship with the kids who I am parenting or working with, or therapizing or whatever it is. And so I feel like that really ties it all together into being like, this is a book for everybody. This is a book for everybody.
I feel like I see so much stuff in the parenting space about, well, we were spanked and we turned out fine, or, our parents never apologized to us and we're fine. I'm like, are you actually fine? No, because that was 30 years ago and you're still talking about it. Kind of seems like if you were fine, you wouldn't still be like laser focused on this thing. One of the things, and it cracked me up that you said something about people just reading your book one page at a time, because my question literally says, I love how simply your book is laid out, because I do just flip it open and look at it. And even if it's not a problem that we're currently dealing with, either there's something there that I can use, or there's just the reminder that kids are fucking weird. And adults are fucking weird. And humans are fucking weird. And all we can do is what we can do to try to be as good as is reasonable at this time in this moment with these kids and with who we are. And some days it's not enough, but tough noogies. I mean, ultimately our kids are doing pretty damn well and we're doing pretty damn well. But just the reminder that they're not doing this at us. And the fact, God love them, these parenting books. I have so many books that may all hold the key to like everything I ever needed to know about parenting. And I love to read. I am an avid reader. But if that book is 400 pages long and there is one sentence in there that is going to be the key to everything I ever needed to know, tough titties, never going to find it, because I have like, there's no way. I'm all about the audiobooks, but it's still, if there's something you need me to know, it needs to be in a bright color or in a speech bubble or in a bright color in a speech bubble.
Oh, and it's got bolding throughout for the things that if your eyes are just gonna jump on something in the page, then it's got sentences or pieces of sentences in bold.
I don't know if I'd even gotten to the pages opposite of the speech bubbles yet, but yes, thank you. I bought a lot of copies. I might just like buy a whole case and just give them to everybody. It'll be weird, but that's okay. So I'm gonna pivot this hard because I've got my overalls with the capybara fairies on them today. See,
are they Lucy and Yak?
Run and Fly. But I've been looking at Lucy and Yak too, because yeah. So for anyone who doesn't know what you look like, I personally, one of my favorite things about your Facebook page is the alt text on your images, because you can tell so much about how people feel about themselves from their alt text. For folks who don't know, it's when you add text so that a screen reader can describe a picture, for folks with vision impairments. But Kelsie, let's just say that your personal style is pretty colorful and fun. Do you deal with any imposter syndrome about not being taken seriously, or how do we embrace how weird we are?
I think that's a really good question, because it's recent. Like it's more recent than people think it is.
Did you used to wear like sweater sets and like substitute teacher clothing with the glasses with the chain on them?
No, but I used to try to perform femininity. And I went to a private school growing up, so I had a uniform my whole life. And then I went to a private college, also religious, and so jeans was the most relaxed I could go. So jeans and t-shirts. And then I went to grad school, and they had like this rule about having to wear like stuff you could do a presentation in, like if you were doing a lecture at like the whatever OT seminar of the country, like what would you wear? And I wasn't good at performing femininity, and I went to like JC Penney's or something and brought like my phone and took pictures of myself in a bunch of like businessy-ish shirts and pants, and then I just like wore black pants with dark colored tops of various types, and then I actually got called for a conference with a person who teaches at the school, who I will be vague about because they're still there, who was like, first of all, I'm really concerned about the way that you always sit unprofessionally, i.e. crisscross applesauce in a chair. And second of all, I'm concerned about the like fact that you don't dress professionally enough, i.e. one of the tops that I wore was a tank top-ish, businessy, not like a casual tank top, like a business tank top, but I guess you could see my shoulders, and that's bad. And also, I wasn't really friends with anybody in the class, and she was concerned that I didn't seem to have anyone who I was friends with because I wasn't. Anyway, I wasn't doing a good job at doing the OT image, and I as much as I would like to say, and I was so confident that I was like, whatever, and I walked out of her office, I was really, really rattled by it. And then I had an OT, so you do like fieldwork rotations, and I had a rotation in a hospital, and I did pretty badly at it, and I just really had very different thoughts about what OT was and should be than the person who was my supervisor, who I occasionally have daydreams about. What if they found my page and saw how I'm doing? Because they were literally like, I don't think you should graduate. I don't think you should be an OT. And then I was even more rattled, after that. And I, lifelong body stuff, a lot of like wear stuff that doesn't have a shape, and a hoodie, and, and it's all black and whatever. And I've always loved it when my hair was short, but lifelong stuff, and feeling like I needed to grow it out and cut it off and donate it, and do that every couple of years. And during COVID, then I cut my own hair, and it's been in roughly the same hairstyle ever since. I haven't gotten a haircut since then, which is like buzzed on the sides and long on the top and the back. And then I've been dyeing the top and the back because I wasn't ever allowed to have dyed hair at any of the schools that I went to because it wasn't professional. And it was COVID, and I didn't have a job because I lost all my jobs. And so I dyed my hair and buzzed it and loved that feeling. And then when I did start having a job, I assumed I would have to go back to brown, but it's short enough that I was like, well, I can just buzz it and it'll just grow back out and that'll be fine. And then when I got to my job in England, everybody was like, oh my gosh, cool hair. And it was like, it was not even like right now it's blue and it has rainbows on the sides. It was not even like, it was just silver. Like it was literally just, I was doing one color and it was silver and that was it. And everybody was like, oh, cool hair. What color are you going to do next? And I was like, oh, you mean like I can? And they were like, why not? And I was like, you're the military. And they're like, well, you're not in the military. You're a contractor. And we're all living vicariously through your cool hair. And I had colorful masks that my friend had made for me. I told her, she's a seamstress, and I told her to make me the most rainbow masks that she could possibly find out of whatever fabric. So my clothes were all like black and dark blue and boring, but colorful mask and colorful hair. And I mix up everybody in the military's titles, so I'm not even going to try. But a very high up person who I loved and respected very much, who I did not like, she would speak to big groups of us, not like us individually or whatever. But she was lovely and wonderful. And we had seen her in these big groups and stuff, and she was just always lovely. And she was coming through my office where we all worked, all the clinicians, and just like trying to meet us and stuff. And she just saw, she was like, I have always seen you in a crowd because you stick out with your hair and your mask, even though my clothes were all black and boring. And she was like, I can just tell you're just such a colorful person. Like it just shines out of you. And I literally feel like she those words like changed. Both coming from somebody high up and coming from somebody professional and somebody who wears a uniform all day, and because she was a military person, if that wasn't clear, and she was like, when I retire, I'm going to dress like you every day of my life. Like, and again, I was not dressed like anything. I was like, it was just my mask and my hair. And it's literally like I started thinking, I am a colorful person. I'm going to get emotional talking about this, and it's such a whack thing to get emotional about, but there's just body stuff going my whole entire life that I could do a whole podcast about. I was like, I am a colorful person. I am like a bright, I love this about myself. And I went from like, I hate clothes shopping. Clothes shopping is something that I do because I have to, like, I have to wear clothes on my body, so whatever. And I like started going to like thrift stores and stuff and finding like one thing that was colorful, and then the 12 things that was colorful, and then everything that was colorful. And now I look like a rainbow threw up a person at all times. And I mean, like, so it, you know, it's been like 3 years, maybe something like that. So like, it's probably at least partially a phase, or things will go in and out of a phase. Overalls are like a 1 year long phase so far. Although I haven't been able to wear them because I hurt my knee and I have to be able to access my dang knee. And taking all your clothes off in the middle of everything, it's not a good way to do that. So I've been able to, yeah, it's not, I haven't been able to wear overalls in ages, but, I think it's like so I don't have imposter syndrome. It's like I like grew out of, I'm abbreviating because of time in this podcast and stuff. I would tell people about all of this stuff about myself and my feelings and all of this stuff, like with no hesitation. But I do understand that I am perceived that way. When I walk into a room, people are like, who are they? What is that? You know, what is happening? And very occasionally people will leave comments on my stuff that's negative. Somebody was like, the post was about my letter writing program that I did with kids, where I wrote 84 kids letters throughout the school year, and they had mailboxes because I was trying to be like, writing is meaningful. Writing has a meaning outside of just being required for school, and they could write me back if they wanted, but they didn't have to. They would get letters from me anyway, and I hand wrote them. I did not type them because I wanted to show off writing. And so the picture was of me in a rainbow shirt with my rainbow hair, holding up rainbow envelopes, and in my office, which is decorated. And somebody commented on it and was like, be careful, we can all see what your agenda is, or something like that. And I was like, my agenda about writing letters to kids? Because that's what the post is about. Like yeah, man, you read the post. Good job. But I am aware that I am perceived as like this kind of whack entity, cryptid. The kids love my hair and love my style, and love to ask questions about it, and are super curious about it, and I love to talk to them about it. And at this point, if anyone had tried to put me back in a box sooner, I don't know if I would have been like, okay, well, maybe that was all a thing, and now I'm back in a box. But now there's no going back. I'm just like, yeah, whatever. You can have me or not. I will not go to a job where they are like, you can't have colorful hair or you can't wear colorful things, because I don't know why I would want to work there, and they probably don't want me. So
there is something beautiful about, I'm just picturing, you know, like the little kid who's wearing the princess dress in the mud, or the, you know, like has the sparkly rubber boots and is going to wear them every day because they're their favorite. Like I had my third child, he wore a top hat for months. Like he wore that, wore a top hat, like in the barn at, you know, like when we were in town, like he would take it off when he went to sleep so he didn't crush it, and then put that thing back on. Like I think it was supposed to be for a snowman costume or something, but he just like loved that top hat. There's something. And like the other time that you got choked up in this interview was when you were talking about your inner child. And I love the fact that you're connected to what you actually want to wear, because as we grow up, we start to adapt in so many ways to be what we think people want, what we're trying to fit in, what people tell us they want, you know, like the explicit stuff that we're told and the stuff that we're not told, but we think people want us to do. But, you know, there is something powerful about going back to, you know, what it is that I actually love. What do I want to wear? What do I want to express with my body and with my clothes and with the person that I am? So I think that's amazing, and you should wear whatever you want. Well, and I mean, be able to access your hurt knee too.
I do feel like it can bring so much clarity to things you didn't realize you were carrying around. Like, this is about as long as my hair ever gets, because same, I cannot deal with it touching me, but that like ingrained, women have long hair sort of thing, or like I have a quote unquote real job that is professional. I work for a big company. I wear my capybara overalls to meetings and people, ask me to stand up so they can see them better. Like, but then I go to pick up my kid at daycare and I'm like, oh my God, what if the other parents see my weird overalls? And I'm like, what? A, who gives a shit? And B, like, they're not writing my paycheck. They have no impact on my life. So why do I give a shit about what random strangers at school pickup think about my overalls? And why do I think they think about my overalls at all?
Other than to ask where you got them. So why don't we just go right to our usual ending question, Katie? I think we've covered a ton today. I'm going to skip our cussing and discussing this for this week because we've all had a lot to say on a lot of different things. So why don't you just wrap up with our usual final question, and then we'll do another episode someday, because I'm sure we've got lots of other things to talk about.
We should get Kelsie and Emily Nagoski on the same episode.
Oh gosh, that was
7 hours later, we're done with part 1.
No, we'll just start working on a conference, all right, Katie? Where we all get to wear whatever we want.
That would be the best conference ever. So we ask all of our guests, if you were going to dominate a category at the county fair, what would it be? And categories can be real or made up.
Okay, so like my entirety of experience is from playing Stardew Valley. I don't even know if I've ever been to a county fair.
That's okay. Yeah. So, I mean, sometimes there's like cooking, there's like crafty stuff. Sometimes people like will show farm animals, but
I admire quilts. I follow a website where people share their quilts and I love those. But so I dabble in every craft in the world and excel at none of them. So if I was going to dominate at something, it would just be like, this person talked on a soapbox for so long that we all got tired and went home, and like the competition is taking a nap, so there's no but I would happily enter the cake decorating one, and then I would come in like fourth maybe or something like that, and everybody would be like, what a nice cake, and then we would eat it and it would be delicious. So
cake decorating is a beautiful skill, but I really just want to eat the cakes. So that's kind of that one's kind of lost on me.
I was more into it when I was like a teenager and a young adult and I had no children and, plenty of free time. At this point, I would be like, yeah, it's going to taste the same whether it's just on there or on there like a flower though. And I want it in my mouth more than I want to look at it. So
the fair closest to me has a category for an unfinished craft, which I love. So
oh my gosh, I love that.
So for all the things that you've started and you're like, it's looking good, it's not quite done yet, maybe by next year or not. So people, there was one I think a couple years ago that was like, that was probably started years ago, just like based on the kind of the appearance of it, but it was like, well, hey, it's unfinished, throw it in there. If there was a sewing subcategory and it was for visible mending, I love that. I do that because now that I'm wearing whatever the heck I want, then if it's weird and I make it look weirder, then that's great. That's fantastic. So if there was sewing for visible mending, yep. I patch holes instead of throwing stuff away. I love it. All right. So we already discussed earlier, but remind everybody again where they can find you online so that they can check out your content and where they can buy your book. So the main place where I'm posting is my Facebook page, The Occupational Therapist. I have an Instagram, which is @Occupational, and I have a website, which is Occupational.com. I try to make sure that my stuff gets cross-posted from Facebook to my website, but it does not always happen. So Facebook is where the most stuff is. Instagram is even less because if you haven't gathered, I'm very long-winded, and Instagram has a 2,200 character limit, and they are cramping my style. So only a few things ever make their way over there. But you can find my book on Amazon. If you're in whichever country you're in, then you have to search on that one. So if I share a link, I'm usually sharing the .com US link. But if you're in England, go to amazon.co.uk and search it there because it's printed in the country where you can order it from. So if you try to order it from the US, they'll say they can't because they don't want to ship it. Or same with all of them. Canada.
AU, whatever the one is that's closest to you. And I think that's pretty much where you can find me. I've got some videos on YouTube, but they're scattered and disorganized, and they all get shared to the Facebook page. So
we'll hang out on Facebook. That's good. Thank you so much for joining us today. It was great to meet you, and to I have a lot to think about, and I need to go buy a book. So thanks very much. It was great to meet you.
Thank you guys for having me.
Thanks, Kelsie.
Thank you for joining us on Barnyard Language. If you enjoy the show, please support us on Patreon with a donation.
Big thanks go out to our show editor, Krista Paffrath at the Rural Podcast Network.
Please rate and review the podcast wherever you listen, and follow the show so you never miss an episode.
If you want to connect with other farming families, join the private Barnyard Language Facebook group.
We are always in search of future guests for the podcast. If you or someone you know would like to chat with us, get in touch.